La Granja, how to set up and play. So to set up the game, we'll give each player their player pieces. This is their farm board. Each player will get a set of markers in their color. They'll get 4 donkey tiles. They'll get one of their markers placed in this spot as a trade commodity. We will shuffle the farm cards and deal 4 to each player. And then each player will start with 1 silver and 1 victory point. Throughout this setup and play video, I'm going to be very precise in my language, because once you understand the exact game terminology for each of the areas and the tiles, that'll make interpreting the cards very easy. To set up the game board, after we've dealt each player 4 cards, we all have the draw deck of farm cards. We'll have victory point chits, and then we'll have silver in 1 and 3 denomination. We'll then take each of the roof markers and sort them by their game round number. The game is played over 6 rounds. So sort and shuffle these and randomly remove tiles so that only 1 per player remain. So I'm setting this up for a 2-player game, so I shuffled each stack and I randomly removed 2. If I was playing a full 4-player game, I would shuffle each stack and use all 4 roof tiles, or roof markers. And then we will display the ones for round 1, and then rounds 2 through 6 will be placed here, again equal to the number of players, in this example, a 2-player game. Next, we'll lay out each of the craft markers that are associated with each craft building. So you'll see there's an icon on the board. And again, you really only need 1 per the number of players, because you're only ever able to take 1 of these tiles per player. So lay out the craft markers for each of the 6 craft buildings in the game. And then place 1 victory point on each of these gray areas. And there'll be 6 of those, 1 that corresponds to each craft building in the game. 3 of the 6 craft buildings are going to be randomly blocked at the start of each game. So we're going to determine which of these markers to place by rolling a die. So we'll roll the first one, and we see that building 5, if we go down here, we'll see building 5 is blocked at the start of the game. And this is the first block building, so we'll have the 1 up there, and we put a victory point chit there. And we'll keep doing this until we block, this is the second one, we'll block that, and then we'll roll again, and then 6. Obviously, if you rolled 1 that was already rolled, you'll just keep rolling until you block 3 of the starting craft buildings. We're going to set the number of dice used in the game. You always use 2 die per player plus 1 extra. So since this is a 2-player game, we'll use 2, 4, 5 total dice in the game. And we can just set those over here next to the revenue die spaces for now. They're going to get rolled in a later phase. And then we'll randomly determine start player. So in this example, yellow was randomly chosen as the start player. And then in clockwise order, you'll hand out the remaining tiles. I've removed 3 and 4 from the game since I'm only setting this up as a 2-player game. So once you randomly determine start player, randomly in clockwise order, distribute the rest of the turn order tiles, and then you can set these markers on the turn order track. It's always starting player to last player is the stacking order. And that's a rule for the entire game. Whichever disc is on top is considered to be higher or earlier in the starting order. So yellow is the start player. In this example, the second player would be blue. If we're playing a 3 or 4-player game, the third player would be stacked third and the fourth player stacked fourth. Finally, each player is going to place one of their markers on a market space to start the game. So the first player is going to go on the lowest available, which is the 2, and the second player would get placed on the 3. If we were having 3 players, the third player would go there, and the fourth player would go on the 5. And then give each player their turn order marker, and you're ready to start the game. So La Granja is played over 6 game rounds. Each round will have 4 phases, and then within each of the phases are a number of steps that take place. Phase 1 of each round is called the farm phase. The color is also important because the color can correspond to specific cards that are played or certain craft tiles. Phase 2 is the revenue phase, and it's indicated by the green color. Phase 3 is the transportation phase, and that has the gray color. And then phase 4 is the scoring or cleanup phase, and that's in an orangish color. This is the player aid that you'll kind of use to make sure you follow the procedure for each of the game rounds. The back half of this shows when and where victory points are scored throughout the 4 different phases and at game end. So the very first step of phase 1, all players will get to play one of their farm cards. But before we cover that, let's cover some key terminology. So first on the game board. So these dice are referred to as the revenue dice, and they correspond to these revenue die spaces that we'll talk about, the phase they come out. We've talked about the six craft buildings that are on the outside of the game board, and each building has a craft marker that's associated with it once a player is able to complete all the requirements for the craft building. There's also a light gray shaded area that corresponds to each craft building that once you complete it, a marker goes there to indicate that you've completed it. This is the central market area, and these are called market spaces where markers will go. These are the roof markers, again sorted and shuffled based on the game rounds. And this is the siesta track that's used for turn order throughout the game and for scoring victory points. Players will earn victory points throughout the game in different denominations, and they stay hidden throughout the game and are tallied at the end. And then these are silver used throughout the game. The farm cards in La Granja can be used in one of 4 different ways. If you play the left side, you can add fields to your farm for harvest goods. If you play the top side, you add market barrows to your farm that can be fulfilled by delivering resources. If you play the right side, you can pay to add farm extensions to your farm that increase your hand limit, allow you to purchase extra deliveries, potentially could give you additional income. This card doesn't have it, or could add stalls to your farm. So let's take a look at these in play. So here's a player's farm, the main board, that I've added a bunch of cards to. And as we've talked about, cards that are played to the left side, or the left side of the card, basically add what are called fields to your farm. And these can be fields for the 3 main harvest goods: olives, grain, or grapes. There's no limit to the number of fields that you can add to your farm, and there's nothing that prevents you from adding multiple of the same kind. It's important to realize that fields are different from dens. So whenever you take these resources from the game, maybe it's from one of the revenue dice spaces, they always come to your den versus your field. You can never freely move a harvest good like an olive freely to your den. And when a resource is in your den, you've got a little bit more flexibility because you can actually sell it for money, for silver. The other type of primary resource in the game are pigs. So pigs, along with the three types of harvest goods, olives, grain, and grapes, form up the resources in the game. And resources can always be purchased from the game or sold at any time. So at any time as a free action, I could always pay 5 silver to add a pig to my farm. At any time I could sell a pig from my farm to get 3 silver. Likewise, harvest goods in my dens, at any point I could pay 3 to get an olive, pay 3 to get a grain, or pay 4 to get a grape, or I could sell any of these goods, 2 for grapes, 1 for a grain, 1 for an olive. I cannot freely sell goods, harvest goods that are actually in the fields. Resources can also be upgraded in the game at a cost. So resources in your fields, you can see the lines that are drawn. They can be upgraded. Olives, either from your field or your den, can be upgraded for 2 silver into food. Grain can be upgraded for 2 silver into food. Markers in here are representing food. You'll notice there's a star icon, meaning it's an upgraded good. And there's also revenue dice spaces that allow you to do upgrades for free without having to pay these costs. An upgrade is a free action that you can do at any time as long as you're willing to pay the silver. You can see that grapes can be upgraded into wine for 3 silver, either from the den or from a field. So olives and grains can be upgraded to food, and grapes can be upgraded to wine. Pigs can be upgraded at the cost of 4 silver as a free action into cured meat. So the 3 actions that players can always do freely are purchase resources from the game, upgrade resources into upgraded goods. Upgraded goods are your cured meats, your wine, and your food. And the third free action is you can use one of your trade commodities. Basically, you would discard this and you have your choice of 4 silver, 2 different harvest goods. These would go straight into your dens. You can draw or play a card. You can take a pig, or you can do 2 free upgrades, basically sliding one of your resources into an upgraded good. So the other way to play a farm card, we've talked about adding fields to your farm. You can also add what are called market barrows to your farm. You can ever only have a total of 3. If you wanted to add a third and you had no room for it, you could discard one and add it. And basically, during one of the phases of the game, you can deliver resources or upgraded goods to your market barrows, and then you're able to score normally victory points and get a trade commodity. I'm playing with the promotional cards, so here you'll see you'll get a trade commodity and victory points, but you won't get to place a marker in the market, in a market space, but we'll talk about that. So playing a card and using the top portion of it is called getting a market barrow, and it gets slid into the top part of your farm. The third way to play a farm card is by adding a helper to your farm. And basically you'd be using this bottom section of the card. And most of the helpers have a color that correspond to the phase in which they provide a benefit in the game, or which they can be used. If there is no color associated with it, it means it can be used in any phase throughout the game. If it has a one-time marker here, it means it can be used once per game round. So when using it, you would simply just kind of put a marker there to say, hey, I've used that for this round, and at the end of the round, you take it off so it can be available for use again. Just like market barrows, if you wanted to add a additional helper to your farm, but you had no room, because you can see you only have 3 spots, you'd have to discard one. One exception to that is the storage builder that gives you a spot for an extra roof tile or a roof marker. Normally in the game, you only have the ability to collect 5 roof markers, but there's 6 rounds. So if you actually had this card and you bought a roof marker every single round, you could actually have 6. And then when you place it, you'd actually get 3 victory points for placing it. But this is indicating that, hey, once you do that, this is one card that you couldn't discard and put another helper in there. But normally, if you wanted to, you could discard the helper and put another one there. So playing fields, market barrows, and helpers are all free to play the card when you get the play card action during that phase. The final way you can do it, play a card, is as a farm extension, and that's playing the right side of the card. Playing a farm extension does come at an additional cost. So when you play your first farm extension, you have to use one of these farm goods. So you could pay a victory point, a pig, a grain, a silver, a wine, an olive, a grape, a cured meat, or a food. When you add your second farm extension, you've got to pay 2 different farm goods. When you add your third, you've got to pay 3 different, and so on. So if you add your fourth, you'd have to pay 4 different farm goods to add your 4th farm extension. Farm extensions do one of 4 things. It increases your hand limit, so you can see your starting hand limit is 3 farm cards. All players got dealt 4 at the beginning of the game, and they'll get to play some cards to start. And then you see this player added 2 more, so his farm card limit would be 5 total cards. It also adds the ability to purchase deliveries in the transportation phase. Every player starts with the ability to purchase 1 additional delivery. This card allowed they can purchase 2 along with their base, so 1, 2. It can also add income during the farm phase. During this blue phase, this player would get 1 silver because of that. And it also adds stalls to the player's board, to the player's farm. So you see each player starts with 2 stalls for 2 pigs. And then during the farm phase, if you've got 2 pigs and you've got the available stalls, they'll breed and provide an extra pig. Only these brown ones are actually considered stalls for the purposes of some of the cards. I added this helper, which is a swineherd. It has 2 additional spots to place pigs, but you see they're not brown, so they're not considered stalls on your farm. They're just additional spots for pigs. So the final important game term is called a delivery. So a donkey symbol represents 1 delivery. So a delivery is defined as moving one of your farm goods from either a field or a den. Sometimes it could come off of a card. And you're moving them to either a craft building. So here you'd be putting silver, or here you'd be adding an olive or a pig. So these are the craft buildings. Or you could be making a delivery to one of your market barrows. All right, so now we're ready to go through each of the phases of a game round. So in phase 1, the farm phase, all players will get to play a card. One exception is if it's the first round of the game, players will get to play 2 cards to start the game. But in all subsequent rounds, each player will get to play 1 card to their farm. They can decide how they want to play it. If they play it as a farm extension, they still have to pay the cost. And then they always draw back up to their hand limit. So you remember, to start the game, players got 4 cards, and the exception in the first round of the game, they get to play 2. So in this case, player has 2, and unless they played a farm extension that gave them a higher limit, they would draw 1 additional card to draw back up to their hand limit. Step 2 of the farm phase is the take income. Basically, you're going to take income from any blue craft markers that you actually have on your farm, and any blue parts of farm extensions. So you'll remember we talked about, hey, there's a blue part of this farm extension, so this player would get 1 additional silver, and if they had craft markers on any of these blue parts, they could earn that income every round during this farm phase. So either get a trade commodity, 3 silver, or 1. They get to choose one of those resources. But we'll cover those when we cover each of the craft markers that you can earn and place on your farm. The third step in the farm phase is to harvest goods and breed pigs. So that's where you'll get to place markers on the left and right side of your board. So for every field that you have that's empty, you can place a marker there. Now, if a field was full from a prior round, you simply could not place a marker there until it was empty. So in this example, a player would get a marker on each of these 4 fields. So 2 grapes, a grain, and an olive. So here I've added the harvest goods to the fields. Also, players have the opportunity to breed pigs. You have to have 2 pigs in your stables and room for a third to breed a pig. So they don't have 2 here, so they would breed no pigs. But let's say they actually had 2 pigs and they had room for offspring during this phase, they would get an additional pig right there. If we look at this player, we see they've got no fields, so they're not going to get any harvest goods. They have 2 pigs, but they've got no stalls, so they couldn't even breed a pig because there's no room for the offspring. The final step in phase 1 is to purchase the roof markers or the roof tiles. Normally this is done in turn order based on the siesta track, except for the first round. The first round is actually done in reverse turn order. So in this case, blue would choose first and then yellow, but normally it's done in turn order. So to purchase a roof marker in turn order, players get the option. You'll see the cost up here at the top. So it's 1 silver to purchase either of these. The cost is always associated with the round of the game. So you'll see a roof marker in round 6 is always going to cost 6. Now these are shuffled and hidden, so you wouldn't know what they were. So players have the option. They can say, yes, I want to pay a silver, and I'll take this one. They'll immediately place it on their farm. If in subsequent rounds they were placing here, here, or here, they would immediately collect the victory points just by placing the roof marker there. And then it's their option when they decide to use the roof marker. So they can leave it face up. If they wanted to, they could immediately turn it face down and take the pig and add it if they had room. Now remember, in this example, maybe they don't have room, so they decide to immediately sell 1 for 3 to make the room and then flip over and add 1 there. This next player has the option to buy it, or maybe they'll decide not to purchase it and just pass. So that is an option. You'll see the color of the roof marker corresponds to which phase it can be used in. So here it can be used to go up, advance twice on the siesta track, but only in the blue or the green phase, the farm phase or the revenue phase. And you'll see on this player aid, this is the first opportunity to score victory points in the game. During the farm phase, you can score 1 to 4 victory points, depending on if you took the roof marker and actually placed it on a roof in your building. One final point before we go on to the next phase: when you're placing your roof markers, you always have to place them left to right. You couldn't place here first. So you place them sequentially left to right as you acquire them in each subsequent game round. The next phase of the game round is the revenue phase, or the green phase. So the start player will roll all the dice. So take all these, roll them, and then we'll sort them based on their value with these revenue dice spaces. So in this roll, you can see 1 associated with that spot, no 2s, so that's not even available. 2 here, and then no dice on the 5 or 6. So basically in turn order, on the siesta track, players will take 1 dice and the corresponding action and put the dice on their farm board. So let's say the first player, who's the yellow player here, decides, I really want a pig. So they'll take this one, they'll place it on that spot on their board, and they'll immediately get a pig. Here they happen to have spot for it. And then in turn order, the blue player would select next, and they would select one of these, and then you go back and forth until each player has selected 2 dice from the game board, and there will always be 1 die remaining where all players will get that action. So let's quickly go over all the revenue die spaces. So take a pig, add it to your farm. You have your choice of either drawing or playing a farm card, taking an olive, taking a grain, or taking a grape. These would immediately go to your dens on your board. Here, you can take 2 different harvest goods, olive, grain, or grape, add them to your dens. Here you can take 4 silver. Here, you can immediately get 2 free upgrades. You remember we talked about upgrades? Or you could get 2 advances on the siesta track. Or you could split it. You could get 1 advance on the siesta track and 1 free upgrade and 1 advance on the siesta track. Keep in mind, if you're moving up on the siesta track, let's say both players took 1 and then blue went on top. This doesn't change turn order. Turn order actually gets changed later. Turn order is always based on these turn order markers that were handed out. So at a specific point during the game round, we will reevaluate the siesta track and re-hand out these turn order markers. So anything that happens in turn order, we're always basing it off these markers. And then at a specific time, we'll evaluate the siesta track for a new turn order. And then the final spot is you can take 2 silver or do an immediate delivery. And as we talked about, deliveries are from your fields, your dens, possibly your cards, to either a market barrow or to a craft building. Once all players have taken both of their dice, remember in turn order you'll take 1 dice at a time and execute the action. There will always be 1 die remaining where all players get this action, and again it gets executed in turn order. So starting with the first player, since this was the last die, they'll get to take 2 different harvest goods, then the second player, third player, fourth player, and so on, and that ends the revenue phase. During phase 2 and 3, since deliveries can occur, victory points from deliveries can come from when you deliver to craft buildings and actually complete a craft building and maybe take that victory point and unlock other craft buildings, but we'll cover that in phase 3. Also, when you deliver, you could also deliver to your market barrow and score the market barrows. Most of the deliveries happen in phase 3, but since there is this delivery action associated with the 6 revenue die, you could complete craft buildings or market barrows during phase 2 and earn these victory points, although most of it will actually happen in the next phase. All right, phase 3 is the transportation phase. The first thing that will happen is all players will secretly choose one of their donkey markers. It has to be one of their unused donkey markers, and then they simultaneously reveal it. So basically, players are choosing how many deliveries they want and how many siesta track advances they want. They'll get to get all of these based on the marker that they choose. So all players will select one secretly and then place it face down and then simultaneously reveal their donkey marker for that round. Once a donkey marker gets used, it can no longer be used again until round 4. In round 4, everyone will get their markers back. So there will always be one that you didn't use. So you've got 4 markers, you'll choose 3 of them to use in rounds 1, 2, and 3. You'll get them all back, and then you can make decisions in rounds 4, 5, and 6. But once you use a marker, you're no longer able to use it until you get them all back in round 4. The next step of phase 3 is advances on the siesta track. So based on which donkey tile you chose in the current turn order, you will advance that many times on the siesta track, starting with the first player. And then each player will go. And then, based on the current siesta track placing, we rearrange turn order. So if after the siesta advances, the discs were like this, now blue is the top player, so they would get the first player marker, and yellow would get the second player marker. And this new turn order takes effect immediately. And you leave the discs where they are currently on the siesta track, because we're going to score victory points for them a little bit later. So we secretly selected donkey tiles. We advanced on the siesta track based on our donkey tile selection. We've reset and reassigned turn order, and now we carry out deliveries. That's step 3 of phase 3. We carry out deliveries in the new turn order that we just set. And you'll remember that a delivery is defined as moving one of your farm goods to either a craft building or a market barrow. The player that's going continues to make deliveries until they choose to stop, or they've reached the number of maximum deliveries specified on their donkey marker. So now is a good time to talk about what happens if you actually fulfill all the requirements of either a craft building or a market barrow. Let's start with craft buildings. So deliveries can be made in any order. So you could deliver this one before you deliver this one. You'll see there's 4 rows. So even if you were playing in a 4-player game, no players could get blocked out. Each player could have their own individual row assigned to them. So let's say this yellow player, they had 4 deliveries, and they decide to do their first one. They take a grape from one of their fields, and they complete this craft building. Now they still have 3 deliveries left, but let's resolve this first. So the first thing that happens when you complete a craft building is you'll take one of your markers and you'll move it to the spot associated with this craft building. If you're the first one to complete the craft building, you get the bonus victory point, and you can just add it face down to your supply. And then you place your marker there. The next thing you'll do is you'll actually score victory points for completing the craft building, and it's always based on the current round. So if I completed this craft building in round 1 of the game, I would get 1 additional victory point. If I didn't complete this until round 6, I would actually get 6 points for completing this craft building. So take your points based on the current round, and then you can just clear off your markers. This indicates that I've completed this craft building, so I can no longer come here. I can only ever come here once. The next bonus you'll get from completing a craft building is you'll always get a craft marker. There's always enough for every player in the game. Each craft marker comes with an immediate bonus, and then a perpetual bonus that is associated with one of the areas on your farm. One important thing to remember is when you place a craft marker on your building, you don't get the benefit until the next game round. That's when it becomes active. The final step, when a player completes a craft building, you check to see if there are still any locked craft buildings in the game. If there are, you're going to remove the next number. So in this example, you see that is the first locked craft building. So now this craft building is now unlocked, so all players can come here, and since this player was the one who unlocked it by completing this one, they get the bonus victory point marker added to their supply. So since we're talking about the craft buildings, let's actually talk about each of the craft markers. So craft building 1 is called the merchant house. So the immediate benefit for completing this craft building is you would get 3 silver, and then you'd place it on your board, and then during the farm phase, the take income step, you'll remember this step with the hand symbol corresponds to that. Now this player would get 1, 2, 3, and this one from their card, they would actually get 4 silver during that step of phase 1. All right, I'm going to jump to craft building 4, which is the deli. So when a player completes a craft building here, immediately get a trade commodity placed on their board, and then, just like the previous one, perpetually during phase 1, during the income step, they would always get an additional trade commodity added to their farm. Craft building 5 works the same way. This is the greengrocer. So when a player completes this craft building, they'll immediately get their choice of a grain, grape, pig, or olive added immediately to their farm. And then during step 2 of phase 1, they would always get that during the take income step. And then each round they always only get to choose one, but they could choose a different one each round during the take income step. All right, craft building 2 is the Wainwright. So when a player completes this craft building, they immediately get a free delivery. They have to perform right away, and they'll get points, victory points, equal to their current position on the siesta track. So you'd actually look, and in this case, they don't earn any points, but let's say yellow was just one spot higher, you could see they could get 1 victory point. 2 if they were in this band, and they would get 3 victory points if they were in this band. But in this example, they were here, so they wouldn't get immediately any additional victory points, but they would get a free delivery if they wanted to. And then, perpetually, whenever they play future donkey tiles, their tile always gets treated as having an additional delivery and an additional siesta advance for each subsequent game round. All right, craft building 3 is the village store. So the immediate bonus for completing this craft building, you can see, is 2 victory points. So they take those immediately. And then the perpetual benefit is in future rounds, whenever a craft building is completed, they would get an additional 2 victory points. Now remember, like we said, these are always good, only good in future rounds. So let's say during this current delivery, they complete another craft building, this would not apply. It's not until the next round that every time they complete a craft building, they get an additional 2 victory points. The final craft building 6, is the butcher. So the immediate benefit when you complete this craft building and take this craft marker is you'll get a victory point for every market barrow you currently have on your farm. So in this case, this player has 3 market barrows that they haven't completed yet, so they would get 3 victory points immediately. And then the bonus ongoing, starting in the next round, is whenever this player completes one of their market barrows, they get an additional victory point. All right, so we've covered the procedure around craft buildings. The other type of delivery that players can make are to their market barrows. You'll remember in our example, the yellow player only used one of their deliveries and had to resolve that craft building first. They still have 3 additional deliveries. So they can deliver to their market barrows. So let's say they use 1 delivery to take this olive, and they use 1 delivery to take this grain. So they're going to actually resolve this market barrow card, even though they have 1 delivery left. They would resolve this market barrow card. So what happens is, most of the time, you'll always get a trade commodity. So you can use one of these markers and always add it to your trade commodity. You're going to score the victory points that are listed on the card. It's going to range from 2 to 6. So you'd get those 2 victory points immediately. And then you're going to take, basically you're carting your goods off to market. So you're going to place one of your markers on a market space on the board that correspond to the number of victory points. So you can see this is a white shaded hex that corresponds to the 2 symbol. And so you can see the 2 symbols are in this kind of this white area. You'll notice that some of these, the outside, have an X. The ones with an X are only used in a 4-player game. So in a 2 or a 3-player game, nobody can place markers here. So the player will place on an available 2 spot based on this one. Now, let's see. So there's one right there. So that's an available 2 spot. And then finally, any adjacent markers that are lower than the one you placed immediately get removed from the board, including yours. So if you displaced one of yours, that would get removed from the board, and you actually score 1 victory point for each marker displaced, not counting your own. You don't score ones for your own markers displaced, but for other players that you displace, you'll score 1. So let's say instead of completing this level 2 market barrow, let's say we actually completed this level 5 market barrow. I got the 5 victory points, and now I get a place on a level 5 spot. So I may choose to place here, which will displace this adjacent one that's lower. This gets returned to that player's supply, and I score an additional VP for displacing 1 marker in this example. The completed market barrow card simply gets discarded out of the game. And you'll notice I'm playing with the promo cards. So in this example, by delivering 3 silver up here, I got a trade commodity and 3 victory points, but I don't get to place a marker onto a market space. So that's the procedure for completing a market barrow card. Now this player has 1 delivery left. Maybe they'll decide as, a free action, they can always upgrade one of these pigs to cured meat by paying 4 silver. So maybe they pay that. It goes to there, and then as their final delivery, they can place it up here and then plan to complete this market barrow in a subsequent round. One final point about completing market barrows and placing your marker on a market space. Let's say you had a 2 marker and all the 2s were filled. Then you actually displace an opponent's 2 marker and place yours there. For the marker you kicked off, you'd get a victory point. And then any subsequent ones that are lower, this is a bad example because it's a 2, but let's say you displaced a 5 because it was only 5 available. All adjacent ones that are lower than that also get displaced like normal, and you get those victory points, 1 per marker you displace. So in turn order, all players will get to complete all their available deliveries based on the donkey tile that they chose. Once every player has finished, starting again in turn order, players have the ability to purchase additional deliveries. And this is based on their player board and any farm extensions that they've added. So all players have the ability to purchase 1 additional delivery for a silver, but you can see this player can purchase 2 additional deliveries by paying 2 silver. And it works just like normal. You can deliver to market barrows or to craft buildings, and you resolve them using the same procedures we just covered. Again, this is done in the current turn order. So 1 player will complete all their additional purchases, and then once the last player has completed their purchases, that completes phase 3. The next phase is the scoring phase. So during the scoring and cleanup phase, the first thing we'll do is we'll score 1 victory point for every marker each player has in the center market. So in this example, the yellow player has 2 markers, so they'd get 2 points. Markers that are associated with completed craft buildings do not count. It's only markers that are actually in this center market. So the yellow player gets 2 points, and the blue player get 1 point in this example. Next, you'd score 1 to 3 victory points based on your current position on the siesta track. So you'll remember we changed turn order based on this. If you're in this band, you'd get 1, this band 2 victory points, this band 3 victory points. And then once you collect those victory points, in this example, they'd get no victory points because they haven't crossed that threshold. And then once the victory points are scored, all the markers slide down. And again, ones that are further up would get stacked on top. That's what step 2 is indicating. So once you score for market spaces and then the siesta track, then you slide all the start player markers down. And the third and final step of the scoring phase is to reveal the next set of roof markers. So discard any that were left over from the previous round, and then show these. In this example, this is round 2, and these are the next roof markers. And that completes the scoring phase, and you're ready to start the next game round. In this example, will be round 2, and we go back to step 1, which is playing a card. If this was the end of round 6, we would go to end game scoring. Basically, all players would sell all resources on their player board, ones that could be sold. So for example, we know that pigs can be sold for 3 each. We know that trade commodities can be exchanged for 4 silver each. We know that olives and grain are 1 each, and grapes are 2 each. Upgraded goods can never be sold. You can see that there isn't a green number for an upgraded good like food or wine or cured meat. So they're worth nothing at the end of the game, nor can they be sold in the middle of the game for additional revenue. Also, any harvest goods on your fields can never be sold. There's no green marker, no green number on these. It's only these resources in your den that can be sold. So basically sell all resources that can be sold in exchange for silver, and then for every 5 silver, collect 1 victory point. That's what this is representing on the player aid. The player with the most victory points is the winner of the game. If there's a tie, the player with the most remaining silver among the tied players is declared the winner. Before we end the video, let's take a look at a representative sample of the different roof markers that you'll encounter. They're pretty straightforward. Again, the cost is associated with the amount of silver you have to pay to take the roof marker that associates with the round. Here you can take 2 different harvest goods, add them to your dens. Here you can draw a card or play a card. Take a pig. You get an advance on the siesta track. Now keep in mind, you get to use these when you choose to, and the colors indicate the phases that can be used in. Take 2 silver. An additional delivery. Upgrade. A free upgraded good. Your choice of a grain, olive, or grape. Your choice of a grain or an olive. Grapes. 1 victory point. And this one, if you take this one, and when you decide to use it, it allows you to flip a previously used roof marker back to its face up, which then can be used at your discretion. And that should be everything you need to set up and play a Granja.